Hey people, it's me Troy, and I'm here of course with the video because you just clicked on it. Okay, yeah, we know. Alright, so yeah, oh my gosh, there's a lot of backstory and anecdotes and all this stuff and journalism and diaries and stuff that I can bring up right now, but I really do not feel like it because I'm ready to read. Every time I turn on this camera, I'll be just about ready to read for the day. Plus my neighbor, he had a Buzzsaw going over there. I don't know, it's gotten quiet, so I don't know what he's doing right now, but I'm gonna try to throw this in here. Yeah, I didn't read anything in the month of February. Child mental health issues, girl, as well as starting a new job, and the two just was clashing with one another. Well, there were some adjustments that needed to be made, both internally and probably a little bit externally, but certainly internally, so that I can, get acclimated to this new position and comfortable and just ready to go. So books and reading was a sacrifice within the month of February. Very intentional, very purposefully. Did not like having to do that at all, but when you're just scrambled up in the head and trying to acclimate, as I said, and to changes in life, sometimes reading, just certain things, certain passions tend to take the back seat for a while. My intentions were to pick back up and get back into reading regularly within the month of March, and I kind of managed to do that. At one point I used to get in 8 books. We're down to 3 now, and the number is irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. But I think that what I'm trying to express here is, just like you guys, reading is such a huge passion, a huge piece of my identity. It brings me back to when I was a toddler, and I think my mom said daycare or preschool or something like that, and I wouldn't relinquish a book that this other child wanted to read because I was reading it and I was enjoying it. So we got into a fight and he bit me on the forehead and caused a knot to show up there. But that's just kind of the genesis, you know what I'm saying? Like, books are therapeutic. Reading and books are therapeutic. There's a bit of catharsis that comes along with emotional catharsis that comes along with it, of course. That's kind of how a lot of books are anyway. But I mean, I don't know the most profound terms to really express what you guys know. I don't need to put into words, but yeah, it's troubling when I don't have a book to read, and intentionally put books and reading on the back burner. Just adjacent to this subject, one of my pet peeves is kind of like, well, maybe we'll say it's like I took a little bit of umbrage with this where you're conversing with somebody about books and reading, and they sort of relate that activity to being escapism. Like I said, a little bit of umbrage. Kind of get it at points. It is such and so, but not so much for me, because I feel like, I don't know, that's never how I kind of viewed it. But that's for another day, another topic, another deep dive, which I suck at. Nevertheless, the reason I'm making this video is because I finally got the energy, finally got the time, finally in a very much more brighter space, and I just want to just get on here and chat with the people. I unfortunately just can't be consistent with this like I used to be, and I think that that's fair. I just had a birthday. I turned a whole new age. As a matter of fact, this is what my cousin got me for my birthday, Sailor Moon mug. When it's hot, I just had a cup of coffee, but when it's hot, you can see like a colorful cityscape behind them. No matter how old I turn, Sailor Moon will always be a component of thy identity as well. It'll always be a priority, as we can see. But yeah, I intentionally wanted to get back into reading. So I chose the month of March to just take my time to crawl back into that space, to get my new routine, my new life in as much order as I can get it, with the subject of reading being applied to my daily activities and experience. And what I chose was books that the author I'm familiar with. They come from series that I've been reading for over 10 years. And just that style that I hunger for at times. And one is much more of a nostalgic type of read. But anyway, I'm not going to share one book because I just don't feel like I want to talk about it. But I did manage to finish reading Encore in Death by J.D. Robb. Now, as you know, in a previous video this year, I said I was having some little trepidations about how my feedback was going to be in regards to this entry into the series. I think it's the 56th book, something like that. I lost count. But this was the book that I gravitated to almost instantaneously when I decided that there was going to be no more dark days of not picking up a book and reading. And it was the perfect thing. It was absolutely magical in transforming me much more closer to my healthy reading space, if that's an okay term to use. But Encore in Death has to do with our famous homicide, futuristic, speculative fiction, homicide lieutenant Eve Dallas. I don't have to expound and share any more about how much I love this series, how dedicated I am to reading this series, and how much I look forward to each of these books. There's no need to do that. And somebody asked me years ago why I don't make more videos kind of reviewing, I can't say the word, but talking about these books individually, and that's because they're all the same. The premise is different. The formula is absolutely the same. The beats, each book is always the same. The only difference is generally the murder, the suspects, and the premise. In this case, the premise has to do with two actors who are a husband and wife couple. They're in the middle of a celebration at the beginning of the book where the husband drinks from a flute of champagne and is subsequently poisoned. Arsenic, is it arsenic or cyanide? I don't know, they may be the same thing, I can't recall, but the point is that he's instantly dead. And then that's of course when Eve Dallas and her team comes in to investigate the crime, and we get into the usual ramblings and focused and shifting and pathways and avenues of what consist or constitute actually a J.D. Robb in-depth novel. Like I said, completely formulaic, completely just the same thing, just the premise and the deaths and the suspect characters are generally different. The reason that I had troubles with this in the beginning is because lately J.D. Robb has been moving forward into, because it's a third person narrative series, but she's been moving forward to looking into different through different lenses outside of our investigative police procedural portions with Eve Dallas. So sometimes we're looking at through the eyes of the villain, sometimes through the eyes of the suspect, and it's not necessarily new, but it's kind of recurring much more routinely in the last few books. So coupled that's not really the bad thing or the thing that got on my nerves at the beginning. It was the book introducing us to this actress and actor couple celebrating, tying that with my pet peeve, as I expressed before, of mystery books that have the setting or surroundings of Hollywood, movie sets, theater, the music industry. There's something inside of me that really kind of repels away from mysteries that have to do with cameras, Hollywood action cameras, and especially actresses and actors. That's not always the case. I can even attest to say that the book Witness in Death within this series was I read that over 10 years ago and I still remember how that book went. Okay, that was fabulous. Witness in Death had to do with stage, but it's not always the case. But I think that what my point is that given that is the premise when we look at the suspect characters as well as the victim, it has a lot to do with that subject matter of Hollywood, and these are actors and actresses. So that trepidation, as I mentioned, was definitely there. But I quickly after 4 pages warmed into the book when Eve Dallas came back on stage, and that's when I flew through it and I just loved it. I thought it was great. It was great. She really juggled her suspect characters. One of the things, while I kind of knew primarily whether the real spotlight was, she did do a good job of just kind of undressing that through each individual, because it's sort of like there's this suspect and this suspect, this suspect, road after road after road. We go down one, dead end, red herring, switch it over, go down the other. So she really did a good job with that, but it's kind of apparent that like if there's 3, the first 2 are not gonna be the primary culprit. There's the tie-in to that. So I suspected who the culprit was going to be, or the proximity character that was going to be the culprit. And I was kind of right. I was mostly right. But yeah, anyway, I just really did enjoy Encore in Death. You know, it's not a lot that I can say other than I just love these books. Here or far, near or death, whatever. I just love a J.D. Robb book, regardless. You know, they just, girl, that's it. So Encore in Death was decent. By the end of the book, I really did enjoy it, and I think that what was much more important and significant to my reading this book is the fact that I was doing it purposefully to get back into reading, and it's just sort of like coming home to, you know, the cast of characters, Eve, Rourke, her husband Rourke, Peabody, just coming home to a cast of characters who have always, and this is the truth, have always seen me through some of my much more darker days, year after year, over a decade at this point. So it was just kind of like the perfect spice to get me back into reading. So that's it. I think that y'all like that. Some of y'all get me. So now the next book that I ended up reading it's kind of the same, but it's much more controversial when it comes to me. I don't have as much passion for it, other than lending my passion towards expressing it as rage. I stopped reading this series 4 years ago because I made a video about how much I was irritated about some of the elements that was in that last book, the book that I mentioned 4 years ago that was released. I've since climbed through the nostalgia that was concurring with the old person of me who, when discovered this series, I've made some videos talking about it, and I decided to pick up the latest book as it came out. But I also said in that video that I was no longer going to go on these escapaded, that's a made up word, Janet Jackson, rants about the series. I am not the same person I was when I was reading these books years ago, and even 4 years ago. In saying that, it's like, you know, some people may say I make rant videos, and there's my neighbor with his Buzzsaw, which, whatever. But you can call it whatever it is, but if I got something to say, I'm going to say it. But at this point, with this book, I don't feel like saying anything. And that was Smolder by Laura K. Hamilton. Sometimes I can have a little bit of shame in saying that I still read these books. There's a touch of that there, but I kind of decided that I'm an adult and I can do whatever I want to do, right? And I work and I make my own money and I pay my own bills. So it's like I can do whatever I want to do. If I want to read it, I do. I don't. The younger me would have had a little bit more trouble with that. But I did read Smolder by Laura K. Hamilton. As you know, this is the 29th book in her Anita Blake's Vampire Hunter series. This has a lot to do with this Anita getting married to John Claude. What's interesting is that this is presented as if the wedding is about to happen, but in the book itself, she mentioned it was months away. So I'm like, here we go with this stuff again. Like, get it together. There's a new villain in town who wants to disrupt Anita and John Claude's connection, and then there's the sex, there's the politics, there's the endless static scenes filled with ramblings, in circular ramblings, same topic going around in circles. It is filler material to the utmost degree. It is, I think that the author tries to reach for depth, but she doesn't have it. To me personally, she doesn't have it. And not what by depth I mean when she converses or gives her commentary through her characters about, you know, sexuality, sexual relationships, masculinity, femininity. I think she reaches for it, but it's kind of not there. Her material does not land with me, none whatsoever. And I think that we can reserve that for another video. But like I said, I really don't even care to talk about this series. I only want to make sure I'm getting something out because I brought it up. And it was a book that I read and I got through it. And I guess I'll have to read the second half because this left on a cliffhanger of sorts. Well, it kind of abruptly ended. So all of the good parts of the book took place in the early half of the book, and then the rest was just the minutia of creatures of talking in circles. That really all it was. And you can tell that the author wrote a whole maybe 700, 800 page book And to fulfill her contract, I would suggest, or I would assume, or allegedly, I don't know, she split the book in half. So maybe she had 2 more books left in her contract before a new one. So she split the book in half. And the second half of this particular story is going to come out in November. One of the things I want to say, a vibe that I picked up from reading Smolder, is I think that the author spent so much time, or wasted so much time, with the melodrama and the soap opera and the hindering of characters over the years. So much time with just these wasted conversations she has with these characters, this certain depth that she's always reaching for that never lands each book after book. I think she wasted so much time. It's like, now that she's getting older, there's nothing left in the juice to squeeze. It honestly isn't. The whole time I was reading this book, I was really just rolling. Essentially, I was just rolling my eyes, and it's just so much of it. But as I expressed or said before, I mainly continue to read the series, or I come back to the series just for nostalgic reasons. When I first discovered this series back in the summer of 2007, it was just an explosively new thing for me. Urban fantasy, a woman fighting crime that has to do with vampires and preternatural creatures, that sort of thing. I just knew, I was blown away by it, especially as a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So that's just kind of what it is. That it really is just a matter of that connection with who I was then and who I am now, and maybe just a bit of OCD and the completionist in me that wants to make sure that I get to the end of something or complete something. So it really isn't a lot to say. It really honestly isn't a lot to say. And for me to undress this book, it's kind of, even though I'm giving y'all something here, it honestly is a waste of time. It honestly is. It honestly is a waste of time, because it's nothing there. There's nothing in this series to grasp. I read them simply for nostalgic purposes. There is no expectation. There is no hope. There's nothing there anymore. It's baffling to me how the author writes the preternatural creatures, and they seem to always need to go to therapy. Like, you are a 400 or a million-year-old vampire and your ass needs to go to therapy? Or a 400-year-old creature and your ass needs to go to therapy? It's like, B, you are what you are. Like, what give me a break. It's like I said, you're reaching for something that is not landed. With me, it's not. Some people, it will be. And I believe in therapy wholeheartedly. Believe me, I believe in therapy. But I'm saying, like, if you about 400 years old and your ass needs to get therapy, you might as well just go ahead and just if you're a vampire, just walk out in the sunlight. Just walk out in the sunlight. Because, I mean, come on. I mean, think about it. Like, who would want to live all their life? Who would want to live over 400 years old, effed up in the brain? You know what I'm saying? Like, girl, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Honestly, it is. Anyway, I said I was not going to get into that book. And y'all probably like, what the hell are you talking about? But the people who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to leave it there. Because I'm a whole new age. I gotta get it together. So anyway, I read those 2 books in April. And then I finished this I read those 2 books in March. And I finished this a couple of days ago. I finally read my copy of Land of Shadows by Rachel Housel Hall, which is the first book in her Detective Eloise Norton series. Eloise Norton is a black homicide detective out of Los Angeles. Now, I've always heard about this author. A lot of people used to be like, have you read her? Have you read her? Have you read her? And it's kind of one of those things like, well, I'll get to her. Like, this book been on my shelf for about 4 years now, and I just not got to it. Essentially, it's about a woman named a homicide detective who's dealing with a dark past involving her sister who went missing after an incident at a convenience store. So she's haunted by that, and then there's sort of this similarities or this recurrency in that darkness that shows up in the case that's introduced within this novel that involves a young girl who was found strangled to death or hanging in a closet inside of condo that's under construction. So the investigative portion, or the Louise's prowess, has to kind of sniff around the contractors, the owner of the condos, that sort of thing. And then of course tie into what were the relationships that the victim had with like her number of boyfriends. That thing just kind of par for the course when it comes to investigative police procedurals. What I will say is that, having finally read her book, or one of her books, is that I was captivated by the voice of Louise. Look at him. Eloise Norton. There's Louise, they call her Eloise Norton. I was captivated by her voice. Now, there were moments where there was a bit of cringe when we come to, like, how you throw in references, pop culture references to dress up your wit. It can sometimes come off as trying too hard. The wit can sometimes come across as trying too hard, or not as subtle in its landing. So sometimes you like wince a little bit, but overall her voice kept me reading. Like from the first 50 pages, it just like clicked. It kept me reading because I wanted to get to the end of what was sort of the resolution that came around her, that darkness of finding out what happened to her sister in her past, as well as being invested in the current investigation and seeing those parallels and similarities. And the author really did draw them together. So there was a tie between those two times and elements. But that was another part of the book that kind of threw me off a little bit. That session or portion kind of felt like a bit of a reach. There was a lot of reaching in that area. I feel like the villain needed just a little bit more time to be developed. And another thing this book did is that it applied another one of my pet peeves when it comes to mystery books. I've said this before, but mystery books where certain chapters features the point of view of the villain and then it switchbacks to the main protagonist is annoying to me. It is annoying because I'm the type of person, like, it depends on how the author does it. If it's an open mystery, okay, fine. But if you are intentionally being vague and ambiguous with like the pronouns of the villain, which in this case it didn't, but that's an example. But the vague and ambiguous with the identity, certain context clues that we have to work towards to try to connect the villain through this veil with the suspects that are being interviewed. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, I'm like, just tell me who it is. You know what I'm saying? Just tell me who it is. There's a balance in which that I think that can work. Either you're giving too much, or you either. I think what I'm saying is either give us the whole thing and let us know who the villain is and make it an open mystery, or give us the bare minimum, just the bare psychological minimum to work with. But I think that this book, it gave us just too much in that middle portion where I just was like, I just wish you would tell us who this person is and let's move on, because I'm tired of reading having these sessions with this psychopath, and then it almost feels like you're playing in my face, but it's personal for me. That's a personal annoyance to me. But what the author did that I think that superseded that is that when she took us, the readers, into the past and into the events, systematically into the traumatic events of Eloise's past that led to her sister's kidnapping, that was great. That was the business. That was the business. That was what really picked up this book for me. Because I love when they do it that way. The villain and the psychological stuff with the villain, that stuff gets on my nerves. I'm not really a fan of serial killer books like that so much. Of course, this depends on how it's done. But when you go into the past of the main protagonist and let us see the events that led to who they are today in the current present time, one-on-one, generally that connects with me. That lands with me and connects. And there was a particular scene in the book where Eloise's mother lost her mind, essentially. She lost her mind because Eloise, her sister, was, kidnapped, didn't know where she was, etc., etc. So she lost her mind. And it got me. That scene got me. I was like, ooh. I was like, oh my God. Because the woman started screaming. She started screaming and tearing stuff up and throwing stuff and all this stuff. Because her daughter, her eldest daughter, was missing. Had been missing for a long time at this point. And nobody could give her answers. And I will say that Miss Hall really, really did a great job of taking us into that past scene through Eloise's eyes and then drawing an emotion out of me, watching that woman, watching that mother lose her mind. And then she subsequently flipped it, and it kind of like a light hit where she was like, she got to move on. Because if she didn't, she still had Eloise. She still had her daughter, her youngest daughter. She had to find the strength to keep going on, not forgetting her eldest daughter, but she still had her youngest daughter to take care of, that thing. So with that, honey, baby girl, baby doll, baby girl, didn't care for the psychological serial killer stuff, but the investigative portion, police procedural, and the backstory past being on stage was the business. So I can't wait I need to go and order the next book, but I'm trying to taper myself down from ordering books. I'm like, girl, order some books. No, I ain't ordering no books. Ordering no more books. So I finally read Land of Shadows. A lot of people over the years, like, have you read this? Have you read it? And I've been like, I ain't read it yet. I got a copy on the shelf, but I ain't read it yet. So I finally read it. So what I'm currently reading, which I can't wait to get into when I get off this camera, is The Conductors by Nicole Glover. It's an absolutely captivating cover that I've seen time and time again, and I recently bought myself a copy. I'm only 50 pages into the book right now, and it's got me. It has me. It has me because it's tying a lot of elements. It's a historical fantasy mystery narrative that takes place during the Reconstruction years. So it's after the Civil War. And it features this character named Henrietta, Hetty for short, and her husband Benjamin, or Benji for short. They essentially are like private detectives in a sense. They are a special interest duo with special interest in terms of people who have certain requests or are looking for someone or what have you, seem to come to them, and they go out and solve their issues. But the magic in it is that they can use sigil magic and other things. I suppose I'm only 50 pages in, but sigil magic is Henrietta can draw a sigil in the air, and it looks like her primary one is that of a crow, and it allows her to do certain things. And in this alternate vision of the Reconstruction era of post-Civil War, these individuals can use magic, and they, as slaves, have a collar on them to, of course, stump their abilities. Although slave owners did use their abilities as resources for, with the stuff that they got, we know how that go. But I just like the fact that here I am 50 pages in, and they've ran across a body. And the mystery person in me, girl, child. The mystery reader in me was like, boom! I was like, oh, we got a body. I know it's weird, but we got a body. So it's like, there's something to be solved. There's a crime to be solved. There's a villain to be stopped. There is chaos that needs to be restructured into order. And you topple that with this interesting historical element, drawn in magic, and black characters who can wield magic and have to be resourceful with their magic. I just hope I'm I'm only 50 pages in, and I'm just hoping, I'm praying that this book gets it going for me. Like, I absolutely do not want to be disappointed by this book. I know many people read it. I don't really watch a lot of videos these days because, first of all, I'm busy, and first of all, I just don't have, I'm trying to get this stuff in order over here. But yeah, I just hope it pulls me through, because I want to read the next book, and I'm reading The Conductors now, and I cannot wait to pick up more of this as soon as I turn this video off. So it got it going for me. It has it going for me. I think it's kind of like reminiscent of that what is it, the Lovecraft Country. I don't know. I never seen the show. I know about the book. I never read the book either, but when I found out that they weren't gonna get a season 2, I just didn't even bother watching the show. And don't tell me to watch it anyway, because I don't feel like getting invested in all this stuff. I just don't. Plus, I don't even watch a lot of TV. But anyway, y'all, that is what I've been reading lately. Okay, some comfort reading of sorts, and finally testing some new authors and being blown away by the first 50 pages of this book. Another thing I wish the Conductors would do is, I wish the author would try to implement some more context and contextures and colorings around certain things or elements, or I keep using the word elements, or certain materials that she's using as a resource to paint her setting, sort of like looking at the garments that they wore and stuff. It just adds a bit more to the imagination when you apply those things, those textures. But anyway, still a good book. Usually I'm the type of person, like, I keep looking at the cover until if I see a character on the cover, I keep looking at the cover until I get that vision down of how I feel like the main character looks. But anyway, I'm at the point where there's a body, so I'm gonna have to cut this video off and see what's gonna happen, because I already can see Hetty gather some magical clues. Okay, I'm being corny now. Bye.